Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of What Are You Talking About? Our new informal talk series where we dive into exciting projects and ideas with researchers and scientists working in the water sector. Each episode features insightful discussions with the passionate minds driving progress in water science. Today, we are chatting with Professor John Selker from Oregon State University. He is one of the masterminds behind TAHMO. So, what's TAHMO? It's the Trans-African Hydro-Meteorological Observatory, a super cool project setting up 20,000 weather stations across Africa. Stations are placed at schools and integrated into educational programs, adding richness to the curriculum and helping foster a new generation of scientists. TAHMO combines this local data with satellite info to give a clearer picture of Africa's water and climate. Stick around as we explore the amazing work of TAHMO with Professor Selker. We had the pleasure of discussing this with him at the Water Science Conference 2024 in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Hi John, good morning, how are you?
Fine, it's great to be here.
Are you vibing with the conference at all? How are you feeling with the Water Science Conference?
I am really impressed. The conference has a lot of excitement, a lot of young people, and it's a accessible scale, so people are actually having good conversations. So I've been really, excited about how well this conference has come off this year.
Were you in the first part of this conference, before 2 years? It was in Puerto Rico, right?
Right. I went to the Puerto Rico conference as well, and I've been very much involved due to my role in the section. I've been involved in the planning of it and trying to help it be successful.
Today, I'm quite interested to talk about TAHMO. What is TAHMO?
TAHMO, it's an acronym for the Trans-African Hydro-Meteorological Observatory. And so TAHMO, which is actually in honor of a particular professor whose name is TAHMO, which we're very delighted about. He's done a tremendous amount of very influential work in Africa. And the TAHMO project arose in 2006, actually, when Nick van de Giesen and I were in Ghana trying to do environmental measurements of tree interception of rainfall. And when we looked for rainfall data, it was unavailable. We were on an experiment station, and there was no rainfall data available for agricultural experimentation. It's like, wow, this is crazy. How could that be? We looked into it more and came to realize that across the continent, there was an almost entire lack of accessible data. This was when cell phones were in everyone's hands. And we said, wow, can't we do something about this? We now have, could we develop, we didn't have it then, but could we develop a no moving parts, totally robust station that was solar powered and would use telemetry with cell phones to take data around the world and to feed data to Africans? And so Nick and I, being very impractical and whatnot, we took that on as a challenge. And our first steps were to build relationships with people who could actually make instruments. We're both instrument designers and makers, but we decided we wanted to have a commercial company do that. And then we moved on from there.
What inspired the initiation of TAHMO, and how has it impacted weather data availability across the African continent?
Yeah, I guess what inspired it were two things. On the one hand was an amazing need. You cannot have a continent that has the greatest undeveloped water resources in the world and the fastest growing population in the world and not have any information about their climatic past or present. That's just totally unacceptable. So it was inspired by that. But on the other side, it was inspired by the young people of Africa. We were seeing a generation of engineering students coming out who were incredibly talented and really excited about the future, but oftentimes without a way to contribute to their own country's self-sustaining kind of opportunities. And so we said, gosh, the talent is here, and the need is here, and the technology is here. This should be doable. And so it inspired us to give it a shot.
So I was quite surprised when I first heard about TAHMO. So it was maybe a few years back, and when I checked the website and all the details in social media, I was quite inspired. And I haven't seen such a large monitoring, like hydrometeorological, like meteorological weather monitoring project from a non-governmental sector in such a continent scale. So how do you collaborate with the governments over there? I know Africa, like the government side, the bureaucracy side, how do you collaborate with them?
Well, this was a very fundamental part of TAHMO, and that is that we think it would be inappropriate to go into someone's country and put in a monitoring system without their complete acceptance and understanding what we're doing. And it's interesting because at the same time we were launching TAHMO, another huge project that had Kofi Annan and other very important figures went into Africa and said, we're going to put in monitoring across the continent. And the first thing that happened was they went to Kenya, and Kenya said, well, because they announced in Kenya they're going to do this, and the Kenyan government said, you can't do that, it's illegal. And it completely shut the project down.
Okay.
At the same time, we had a graduate student on the ground in Kenya whose entire job was to talk to the Meteorological Agency of Kenya and learn what would they want, what would work with them, what would be a feasible framework for us to work together. We ended up signing an MOU in 2014 with the Kenyan Meteorological Organization, which specifically gives them what we call the big red button. And the big red button is that if they ever feel dissatisfied with our work, or if they ever feel threatened with it, they have complete authority to shut us down. It's their country. We also give all the data free of charge to the Met Office. We also give all the data free of charge to anybody who's working towards a peer-reviewed publication. And then we obtain the right to sell the data, which was very controversial, to sell the data to commercial businesses so that we can support the enterprise. And keeping in mind that TAHMO is never going to be a project. It is an enterprise. What does that mean? It means that we don't have an end date. You cannot have an end date if you're doing climatic observation. So we had to have this vision for unlimited sustainability. So when Kenyan Met signed off on our MOU, and there's a big ceremony, then the other Met offices around Africa started saying, what's going on here? Kenyan Met is one of the most respected Met agencies, if not the most respected in Africa. And so that then led to a domino of Uganda, Malawi, Ghana, Mali, we now have 23 countries that we work with. And so this notion that we give complete authority to the country we're working in, and that doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want with our equipment. It's our equipment, and we maintain it, and we have our own staff, and that's very important. But they understand exactly what we're doing, and if they ever were dissatisfied, they can just shut it off tomorrow.
I always feel like this is a complicated situation, working with bureaucracy and working with government. And like in such countries where there is the situation of political instability all the time. So.
Well, I mean, we're working in some of the most unstable countries in the world. We have stations in Chad. We have stations in Mali. We have stations in northern Nigeria. We have stations around the world around Africa in unstable locations. We're now working in Central African Republic. So we really experience that a lot. We're going to be going into Somalia. And but the thing is that you work with the people who are there, and you only work when you can do something reliably. And Chad has been very challenging for us, for example. So we sometimes fail, but we are working in very difficult conditions.
So how do you take care about the security of the instruments and people?
We have very little problem with vandalism. It's remarkable. I mean, this was one of the big questions was how we can do that. Well, what we do is we put our stations at schools, and so the school headmaster and the school science teacher are generally our hosts. And so then we talk to them, we put it up in a place. Their students then feel very proud of this station. They have a high-tech station that's part of a global network of observation of climate. And they then have lesson materials, and we try to have a high impact on the school. The schools then protect those stations. And so they don't let anybody mess around with them. And so that process has been very effective. We also do put stations, for example, at dam sites, reservoirs, where there's a government office, a meteorological office. Sometimes we'll even find a large farmer will want a station, and they will fund it. We'll put it up at their site, and they will then be the caretaker. In each case, the stations have a local caretaker, and that person is watching out for it. And then in each case, we have a technician who is the assigned technical support person who knows everything about the technology and then can go out and do whatever needs to be done in terms of continuing maintenance, cleaning, and all those things that have to be done on a regular basis.
Yeah. So we just talk about school, and I've noticed about the school-to-school campaign, and it is, I think, one of the most interesting aspect or part of project I have seen, because I have seen a lot of modules, I have seen a lot of materials, curriculum out there. And another thing is that how you are connecting some schools from Western world to different parts of world in different schools of Africa. So how did it start, and how has it been, the school-to-school campaign?
The school-to-school campaign has always been inspirational for us. We came into TAHMO with grand ideas and with lots of thoughts, and one of them was that Western schools would be willing to fundraise and generate funds to put in stations in Africa. That's turned out to not be true, mostly because we have not had the bandwidth in our team to really do the outreach. It takes a lot of work to get one school organized enough to get a donation. And when we're dealing with, we have 700 stations, and we only have a couple of us in the western side. So it's very, we have a school station in Corvallis, Oregon. And so the model is still good. What we're looking for now is greater funding for that program, and I think we may have some lined up. We've been working on this year after year. The Swiss government put in a fair bit of money, and they really helped us develop the program in Ghana, also in Cameroon. So we have certain targeted areas which allow us to develop some of the materials. Our experience was that when we paired up a school in Corvallis and a school in Kenya, the Kenyan students' work was so much higher quality than the American kids' work that the American kids had to race to catch up.
Oh, wow.
and that was so impressive for everybody. On the Kenyan side, they saw it. They said, wow, we are actually performing. And on the American side, the students said, wow, Africa has smart kids in it. And that alone was worth the price of entry for me. It was just that one experience. And so we continue to hope that we'll have further advancement in that area. We're also looking at school-to-school across country lines within Africa as a possibility, because we have a lot more schools in Africa already. And as I say, we've just completed a significant portion of work through Swiss funding, and now we're applying for a new batch of funding. Our key thing now is, how do you make the teachers' lives easier? Teachers are ridiculously busy. And so if we're going to make their lives easier, it means we have to have our modules, which we have many of, we have to put them into the national educational structure. Each country has an educational framework. And they say you have to learn these things. And if we can solve a problem for the teacher by saying, oh, here's your energy module. Here's we have a solar panel, we report all this stuff, you can have them do calculations, here's how the sun works. If we can make their lives easier, then they'll adopt our lesson plans. As long as it's just like more work, they can't. All teachers are too busy. So really, we're looking in Kenya again to work with the Department of Education, who we've had good contact with, and say, okay, how do we integrate these into your curriculum? And one of the key pieces of the whole educational program is there's a lot of discussion about climate resilience, right? What is climate resilience and where will it come from? Climate resilience is the ability of a people to make very good decisions under very difficult conditions, climatic decisions. How do you do that? You do that by understanding the system. You're not rolling the dice, you're thinking about it, you have some information. And so we see climate resilience fundamentally resting in the schools. That's where it's going to come from. And so we're still committed to that as a key portion of the TAHMO mission.
So can you remind me how long it has been since you started?
Well, as I say, the early ideas were in 2006. We framed the kind of structure of the project or the enterprise in about 2009. We got our first grant funding in about 2011, and then we signed and then we signed our MOU in 2014 with that, and we had by that point funds to put in over 100 stations, and so really 2014 was the kickoff of major installations, and and now we have from there we've had we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. We have over 700 stations installed in 23 countries in Africa.
Yeah, I've seen many social media post about the celebration of the 10 years.
It was amazing.
Yeah. So moving on, what do you think are the biggest challenges you have faced while implementing TAHMO across diverse African continent, and how have you overcome them till date?
Well, challenges are abundant, and I think the biggest challenge is we were using a model which was completely new.
Yeah.
That no one understood what we're trying to do. They have Met services, they have, donor agencies, but there's never been a independent, freestanding, not-for-profit organization dedicated to continental scale climate observation, as far as I know. And we also wanted to do it at a price point which is completely different than anything to date.
Yeah.
Our price point is of roughly 2% of the price that is expected of World Meteorological Organization.
Oh.
It's 2%. That's 50 times. So, an example, in West Africa, there was an African Development Bank project that was spending $600 million to improve climatic observations in 11 countries. That $600 million is 2,000 times our annual budget.
Wow.
That's 2,000 times.
Yeah.
And we're in 23 countries. That was one project, which, by the way, I never saw any results from. There's a long history of extremely expensive projects, and they have an end date. Another really classic example, we were asked to help out in a country, I won't name the country, and the funding agency wanted us to put in stations, and they wanted us to do the whole project development and installation in a period of 11 months, and then walk away.
Yeah.
And we just said, no, we don't do that. We don't do walk away. We are never going to be involved in putting in stations that are not going to be expected to be maintained for at least 10 years. We have to, that's not climate observation. And so unfortunately in the funding community, they really care about checking the box that they got something installed. They want something they can take a picture of. We are not so concerned about that. We want to have data, and we want to have long-term sustainability. So the challenge was, how do we get funding for this model? The World Bank funds countries. They don't fund continents. All these organizations are expecting a different model. So for us to get funding was really challenging. And we've been incredibly lucky, and we have several years of funding in the bank. We keep our project very stably funded. And we have some really, hopefully some big opportunities coming up. I think that the model has been shown after 10 years and 6 billion observations, what we can tell people is, hey, it works. And by the way, it costs like, a tiny fraction of what you normally expect. And it's all African. When they see the room, when the people came to our celebration and they saw an entire room full of TAHMO staff from across the continent, and they said, these are the only paid people in the whole program. And it's like, oh, this is an African project. These are African people. These are people who stick with us. So I think the toughest thing was having a model that no one had seen before.
Yeah, I can also see the whole local people from the region in the website to except few co-directors, right? Almost everyone is from the Africa. Yeah, that's I think the beauty of the project.
Well, it's the power of it. Those guys are on the ground and smart and doing incredible work and so dedicated. It's we don't have people leave the project or of TAHMO, and we don't pay them enough to say that it's for the money. They're not doing it for the money, I can guarantee you. But they love the project and they love being part of the team, and they see it as something that has meaning.
Yeah. I think TAHMO is something people, maybe next generation people, maybe after several decades, a century too, will remember, because it has such a huge footprint now. I think people will be appreciating the effort for decades to come.
I sure hope so. It's very emotional to think about the continent of Africa and to realize that humanity has let down a continent, and humanity did not attend to the needs that those people have for knowing their own climate.
Yeah.
And it's due to lots of political machinations and all sorts of things. But the people on the ground know they need it. They have the skills to get those data. And I just feel like there was no sitting around. This was one of those things that when you realized that we could do something and that the importance of it to us, we couldn't hesitate. And so I hope it is remembered. I hope that people will reproduce it in other places.
Yeah, I have this thought in my mind. So we are trying to start something like in Afghanistan now. The political situation over there in recent years has changed a lot. So when we think about these things, so what I think is that meteorological observation like these stations or this category should be put in some special, should be given some special priority by maybe world, I don't know, UN or something, such that even though there is some political crisis, some humanitarian crisis, these stations should be protected as if it's kind of like a fundamental human right. Because even if there is something going on right now for a few years, if we can protect or if we can continue do the data collection for these times, I think it will benefit the next generation to come. What's your thought on this?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I would think that we see this as a way to knit humanity together. That we have collaborations around Africa and around the world, and this knits people together. And if we look at our fractured world, having something which is a symbol of, oh, we're part of something. The world cares about us. We are part of the world, not fractionated.
Yeah.
And so I think, and the climate doesn't respect boundaries.
Yeah.
And so when you look at little Rwanda, how is Rwanda ever going to have excellent climatic information? It relies entirely on Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, all the countries around Sudan. And so it is fundamentally something that extends beyond borders, and that it is, I think, a human right. It is almost beyond a human right. It's almost an ecosystem right. That if we know that our ecosystems are in trouble, and we have to have these data. And so I think that it sociologically, it makes a very important statement. We're all in this together. And regardless of your religion or your politics or whatever other thing it might be, in terms of our global climate, we're all in it together, and let's be one in that area at least. And I think that's a beautiful vision for Afghanistan, for any other countries. And as I say, we're going to Somalia, and I would love to see. This would be a tremendous example of extending beyond Africa.
Yeah, it would be quite selfish for us to say as it has a human right. Yeah, I think you just coined the right term. Maybe it's an ecosystem right. It's not just human, it's nature, like wildlife, and everyone deserves to have that data. Even though we just know the value right now, but I think it will affect everyone, not just human being. Yeah. So looking forward, what are the next steps for TAHMO, and how do you see the project evolving in coming decades?
Yeah, well, one of the very next steps is recognizing that robustness is really important. So what we have is a phenomenally robust, no moving part station but it does fail sometimes. The batteries get damaged, whatever might happen. So our first and foremost objective right now is to actually add redundant technologies, parallel stations, using completely different technologies that can therefore, if one station fails, the other one's still there. And that gives us the opportunity for our technical staff to get there, fix the first one, and not have a gap in the observations. So this is something which we just really see as fundamental. And I think that The other thing is we've been extremely, 2% of the normal cost. Well, we kind of recognize that maybe we should go to 5%. And this is one of the ways, is number one, having redundant technologies. Number two, being able to hire more technical support people in the country. And number three, being able to have more engagement in the educational programs. So, and probably also more engagement with the meteorologic services. We want to be part of the training and the dissemination. So the thing is that so many Met services seek to have global modeling informed decision making. Well, it's really hard for those like Rwandan Met Service or whatever it might be to have a full team that's fully aware of all the stuff going on in the whole globe. So what we want to do is embed TAHMO technical staff in the Met Services and act as a technical resource, and then do trainings in each Met Service and bring our people back to make sure they're fully up to date. And basically, instead of having these short-term trainings that people go to and then forget, we want to have this notion of we're creating a global human infrastructure where people are not trying to recreate the wheel, but they actually can leverage what's all been done. So I think that the idea of robustness and training are really key to where our future is.
Yeah. Okay. We are almost at the end of the conversation. So I have a few general questions for you.
Sure.
I always ask these questions whenever I go to any conference. So what do you think is the most significant challenge our generation is facing today?
Well, there are many. And I think that the ability to make social decisions based on truth is probably one of our most challenging situations. We actually find ourselves with technologies that would allow us to take care of our planet. The technologies are not very expensive anymore. And the challenge is how to envision the flow of decisions and resources that provide us that path. And so TAHMO is one of the ways that we provide data and truth about these climates. And I think educational commitment is a very fundamental commitment to truth in ideas. And I don't think there's any shortcuts. There's no magic wand. We have to focus on education and truth and commitment to future generations. And so that's, right now I think one of the big challenges that people have kind of shortened their horizons a little bit in terms of thinking about 7 generations. And I think the Native Americans of the US at least always had in mind 7 generations. The potters of Japan, where I just were, they always were preparing clay for 3 generations from now. Historical cultures know that you have to think about the future. And I think we have become too short-sighted in our vision. And so our job right now is to think long-term, realize that it's not about me. I'm going to be dead. It's all about what 7 generations, what are they going to experience? And how have I prepared for that?
So my next question would be, so what are your suggestion or advice for young researchers who are out there, like maybe graduate students or early career researchers? So right now there is this conflict between, science versus, metrics, like, in terms of metrics, in terms of like publications. So I can see publication as a market to build a profile, to have a CV, good CV or portfolio or something. And in other way, there is the science, like innovative science and the spiritual science that we want to do. So what would be a suggestion for young researchers today regarding this thing?
I think the world presents opportunities, and you have to be open to those particular opportunities. You need to match them to your passions. And so I myself started in carpentry, went to electronics, did international development, went to,
Wow.
then went to graduate school later, and then et cetera, et cetera. And then I didn't intend to be a professor. And it happened that there was the right opportunity at the right moment, and I've been very much thankful for that.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'd say is that students should remember that when their heart is fully engaged and when their mind is fully engaged, they will do their best work.
Yeah.
And so always say, am I where I'm happy? Am I where I'm really engaged? Am I working on things I believe in? When you do that, then your work is of a quality that impresses everyone, and you will then the world naturally opens up to you. When you focus on metrics, when you focus on other people's opinions of you, then the world closes down. And so I really think that, I mean, speaking from a professor who sees lots of resumes come across my desk with lots of different metrics listed on them, my most recent student that we brought on had a poor graduate record, undergraduate grades. But you look into what was really going on with that person, and they were growing, and they were doing amazing stuff. And that was they had put priorities on other things other than their grades. And it came shining through, and we're really excited to have that person in our program now. And so I think that, focus on using your full mind and soul, and then you'll be successful regardless what happens. You can almost not fail. That is, the world is desperate for people who are looking over the horizon and saying, this is what I can contribute.
Yeah. So this is my last question. So you have mentioned about the challenge that we are facing today earlier. So what would be your message to normal people, to public out there? How can we face this challenge together?
Well, I think the first thing is to relax a little bit. So, people get very uptight and very concerned about the future, and that's with good justification. But the world is much more resilient than we give it credit for. And so, first thing is to take a deep breath and say, it's going to be okay. And then I think the second piece is to minimize your resource consumption. So why do we do that? Well, first, of course, it's good for the earth. But one of the major things in life is that if you have saved some money and minimized your consumption, that opens up opportunities. And in my life, it's been very important that I'm a very stingy guy, not stingy with the world, but stingy with myself. And I always tried to have enough so that I could make a free decision about what I could do next. And so I think people, often they look at those new tennis shoes or new this or new that, and I say, no, I have old shoes on. Why do I have old shoes on? Because I want to have that ability, if it's time to do something new, that I can make that move. And I think that, so being a little bit calm and saying that if I'm thinking about the future, I need to have a very secure present. So look to minimize your resource consumption, and then give yourself the opportunity to make cool decisions based on a position of strength.
Yeah, wow. That's an amazing statement. Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Sure. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.